All right, welcome to the Atheist Experience. We are live. It is Sunday, May 29th, 2016. That's Memorial Day weekend here in the United States. And I'm Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week, Tracie Harris.
Hello.
Hooray, and there was much rejoicing. It was funny because, I don't know, I didn't think to ask you. There was a post that somebody had made about your meme about,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It's the only meme.
So he made a stupid remark about the logic of it, basically saying, well, this doesn't just prove God, when that wasn't the point.
No, it
and then
wasn't
he
the point.
made other comments about you personally, and it's sad what happens on the internet sometimes. But it reminded me of how much I actually despise, sorry to say, internet memes in general. I don't care if there's a good quote by somebody there.
Yeah.
In much the same way that I don't think matters of philosophy should be debated on Twitter, I don't think that memes are actually doing us a great deal of good. They're the McNuggets of thought, and they are quite often wrong. They are on occasion deepities, something which, to the extent that it's true, it's trivial, and to the extent that it's profound, it's actually false. And I look at the community, and I look at a lot of the discussions that take place, granted, on this show and in other places. I'm not excusing myself or any of us from it. I think we have on occasion lost sight of nuance, where it's far easier to pretend that the people who don't agree with us on a particular issue are stupid or evil,
Yes.
than pointing out actual flaws. So that, here's my argument. Let me point out the flaws. No thanks. Let me just make a little meme that it acts as if I've addressed it.
Yeah.
And quite often they're addressing straw men. But we're live from Austin, Texas, and we have our studio audience on the other side of the glass. And we've got full callers, and we'll get to callers here in a little bit. But you actually had something you kind of wanted to discuss to lead us into the show.
Yeah, just lightly. So I watched Left Behind last night with a friend of mine, and I know it's not like a recent film or anything, but it's the first time I've seen it.
This is the Nick Cage one, right?
It is. Yeah. It is. And
I have to say, I have not actually watched that version.
I actually expected it to be more of a Christian flick. I did not realize, I guess, what it was. And like the person that I was watching with said, oh, this isn't like a preachy Christian movie at all. It's a how are we going to land this plane movie. And I was like, yeah, it totally is. I mean, it was just one of these things where it's like, oh, they're stuck in the air. And I guess all the, people that work in towers were evangelical Christians, and so they all get raptured or whatever. And so there's, nobody to talk to. And they finally get people to talk to, and then the airports are all loaded. And so it was just this sort of, how do I get these passengers down out of the sky?
And see, I wouldn't have expected this one. Having grown up in the time frame when the books were written and when there were the earlier kind of crappier versions of the left, not
I
maybe
am
they're
doubting
not
that whoever wrote this movie was promoting those pamphlets.
The books, novels.
Okay,
big,
well, whatever.
Big series of novels. My thing is, when I first heard about this, it was like, really, we're gonna do that again. But I didn't look at it as, because of the cast and the people involved. To me, this was the rough equivalent of that Noah movie that came out.
Oh, I didn't
recently,
see that one.
Which had like rock monsters and stuff. It wasn't tied to the Bible, and I didn't hear a lot of promotion about it. But
yeah, but I had some notes. It was like the first note that I had was that my main takeaway from the film is that Christians have a moral obligation not to take jobs that involve being responsible for other people. So if you actually believe that the rapture is going to occur and that no one can predict it,
right,
then you should in no way be in a job like surgeon, pilot, anything
air
that
traffic
has to
control.
anything that has to do with if you had a heart attack and died in the moment that you were performing your duties, it would put people at risk. You should not take that job if you literally believe that you're going to disappear one day without warning or notice.
I think I kind of see that point. My one the one job that initially came to mind, where I was like, oh, you shouldn't take that job. I've now changed my mind. I was thinking, the TSA security at airports. You shouldn't take that job because you're responsible. But on the other hand, I'd like to just get rid of all that and get on the plane and go.
Yeah.
So maybe it would be better to.
Well,
to have them
but
there.
the scary thing is that apparently, I don't know how to, but if Muslim extremists, according to the film, would probably still also be left behind. So you'd have no TSA, and you'd also have, people trying to bring bombs on planes. Because even a really cool Muslim guy that was super nice to everybody and who didn't carry a bomb on the plane, he was left behind too. So, and his first reaction was, maybe we should all pray. And so this is a devout, theistic character who was also very kind and nice to the other characters and trying to be helpful to the other characters. And he was left behind because this has nothing to do with whether or not you're a good person.
Of course not.
The rapture is all about, do you accept Jesus and believe the story, and not about whether you're a decent human being or not.
Maybe. So the qualifications for who gets raptured and who doesn't, or what the qualifications are to be saved, there's considerable debate and discussion amongst the different denominations about this. Is it merely accepting and repentance, or is this something that's truly by the grace of God, where he's basically picking and choosing?
Yeah.
You're the ones I'm going to take,
Mm-hmm. So the film portrays the Christian characters mainly as insufferable nut jobs. Like, that is how they are portrayed in the film. Not just like my takeaway, but all of the other characters are like, there's one character that has an engagement with somebody that they just meet, and like it's a slight acquaintanceship, like in passing, and someone else comes along and sort of gets them out of that situation, and later they're like, thank you for getting me away from the crazy person. And everybody that's watching, I'm sure, relates to it, because the two characters that are like, thank you for getting me away from the crazy person, and the person that got them away from the person, were both very likable characters that seemed to have a good head on their shoulders and seemed like decent folks that, cared about others.
Likable to you. See, if a Christian sitting there watching that isn't going to see those people as likable. Those are the people who are persecuting them.
No, I'm talking about the film, though. Like, the film itself portrayed them as like very likable characters.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, I just didn't expect to see this. Like, I was thinking it was going to be more of a Christian propaganda film. And so then the other thing was, one of the main characters, her mother is one of these people, and one of the things I noticed was her mother alienated everyone in the family with her religious proselytizing, so that she ended up spending her last few years on earth with no relationship with her children and her husband, literally driving her husband out of the house so that he didn't even want to come home anymore. He was, he's the pilot, and so he doesn't even want to come home anymore because his wife is so just, no one can put up with her. And the daughter who comes to see her dad and says, I hope you'll be home for this special occasion that we're having, when he says he's not going to be able to be there, she basically has a talk with him about how the mother has changed and says, I'm really sad you won't be there, but I understand why. So even the daughter who misses her father has to admit that she understands why he can't stand to be in the house anymore, because the mother is like beyond tolerable. And so it was interesting to me that if you really believed that this end was coming and you had told your family about it and they had said, yeah, thanks for letting us know, not buying it, you probably should then just drop it and enjoy the remaining years that you have with your family, because now what happens is you have this rapture and all the people you love are left to the upcoming tribulation, and you were raptured away, right? And instead of enjoying and bonding with them in the final years that you had with them, and in those last moments in time that you had to actually, express love and have a relationship with the person, you blew it by alienating everybody, by being an insufferable person. And so it's like, if your choice is have a few years to enjoy with your family before the rapture and the tribulation, or ruin the time you have with them here, and then they go through the tribulation anyway, you really have done the wrong thing. You made the wrong choice. You lost what little time you could have had enjoying your family. And so, let's see what else. The atheist characters were mainly likable, and but apparently God doesn't like Muslims, even if they're super nice and helpful and believers. And there was like I don't know what the age limit was. There was like a free pass for youngish people. Like, I don't know at what age it cuts off. They didn't really say.
Nobody knows.
Yeah. When I went to church, the big question was whether or not babies would go to hell, and nobody knew, because it doesn't say whether or not babies will go to hell. It's kind of your call. And
The idea of an age of accountability isn't biblical at all.
Well, and the thing is that there are some verses, but they're all Old Testament that have to do with that, and it has nothing to do with the salvation dispensation.
Right.
It's like this is all Old Testament stuff, and it had to do with being judged via the laws, and then you had, and even that was like 13 or something, I think, right? When you were an adult in the Jewish.
Sure, I think it was 13.
Yeah.
Which,
something around that age, but it certainly wasn't 18.
yeah.
And so the one of the main characters, her little brother, I'm assuming gets raptured. He disappears, and so he's absolutely old enough to understand right and wrong. I mean, he's got the knowledge of good and evil. And somehow, even though they make no mention of the brother being involved in any of this religious stuff, he gets raptured too, like mysteriously. So even though you're able to be accountable for your actions, apparently you still get a free pass if you're under some mysterious age. And of course, all the babies disappeared, which led me to wonder if pregnant women become non-pregnant. Like, do they just stop being pregnant, or how does that work? If you're, So I don't know. The other odd thing.
Time to buy a new wardrobe.
Yeah, well, it's weird because speaking of wardrobe, one of the other things was all the clothes got left behind. So I was like, the rapture must just be one big naked fest,
yes.
Like happening somewhere in heaven, because your body is gone. So this isn't like a spiritual rapture. This is like they were physically removed. So you've got all these naked bodies somewhere, like hanging out in.
Well, it gets back to the idea that Adam and Eve were naked and the world was sinless. And when they got the knowledge of good and evil, that's when they covered up. That's when naked became sinful. And so, of course, when you're raptured and you're being shepherded off to paradise to live with, Jesus, no more need for clothes.
You know what's always confused me about that? The whole idea of you had the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Mm-hmm. And supposedly, the serpent basically came and said, if you eat this, you'll be wise like God. You'll understand these moral, values like God. And later, when they do eat it, God says they ate it and now they're like us.
Yep.
Right? So he agrees. But the problem is, he made the people naked and he said it was good. But when the people gained the knowledge and then they're just like God, like as far as their understanding of good and evil, they judge their nakedness as evil. So how is that possible? Like, how can
we have stumbled upon it. The other interesting thing is once everybody's raptured and they all get up there in heaven, that's when they will figure out not all men are created equal.
But shouldn't they be looking at their nakedness saying this is good? If it really is, if it's a tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Oh, it is good at that point.
And it imparts real knowledge.
It's not their nakedness that's evil. It is the lust that is derived from the nakedness that is. So the sin that was brought in was this lusting after the flesh. It's not the flesh itself. And so when you go to a state that's sinless, you will no longer lust. So this big naked party in heaven, there's no sex. There's no lusting. There's no, the sinful fires aren't burning in anybody anymore. So it's not the nakedness that was bad. It was what people did on behalf of the nakedness that was bad.
Yeah, I think they should clarify that in they should make a footnote for
Bible
that.
2.0?
Yeah, they need to do an update. So then they had, let's see what else. I had some just joking little things about subplots that weren't actually real. And then there was like a shockwave too. That was another thing. Like when the rapture happens, there's this big shockwave. And I'm like, what in the hell's causing a shockwave? Like, why would it cause a shockwave?
Well, if there was a physical body here and it was removed, and you did this for a lot of people, that might create little vacuums that have to be filled in, and then there's...
I don't know. It was really weird. I was like, I don't know why God wouldn't, they're just disappearing.
Did they show the bodies leaving the clothes?
No,
were the
they
clothes
were just
like
kinda gone.
in a crumpled
Yeah, the
okay.
clothes are all piled up.
Well, then that doesn't work, because if we were going with the vacuum thing, the clothes had been, like in a little vortex and swirled around.
You'd think there would be, I
Because
don't
I'm
know.
an expert on biblical physics.
And the shockwaves are like up in the sky outside the plane and stuff. And I'm just like, how is it shaking up the whole plane? And I couldn't figure that part out. I was really stunned that there was a shockwave and I didn't know what would cause it. And then there was one scene I had to laugh where a young woman, one of the main characters, goes up to she climbs up this bridge, and at that point I'm texting my friend and I'm just like, she is like the queen of useless ideas, right? Like, what is she doing on top of the bridge? So she climbs up on top of this bridge, and it's like one of those big suspension bridges, and she's way up on the top, and she starts saying, like, Mom, if you can hear me. And my friend goes, maybe the reception's better up there. I was like, that's priceless.
So it says with one big antenna.
You need to climb way up for them to hear you up in heaven. So that was kind of fun. And then, what was it? The roads were amazingly clear for people just having been pulled out of their cars.
Clearly the producers didn't watch enough Walking Dead.
Yeah. Only the country roads should be clear, not the city roads, which,
right.
yeah, they had lots of cars not on the roads, even in the city. And let's see, and my friend said maybe the rapture happened on a Sunday. Like maybe everybody was at, buffets and things. But let's see, the road, okay, this is a spoiler, so if you're planning on watching it, plug your ears or whatever. I'll let you know when the spoiler's over. I'll put my fingers down. But it turns out that the preacher is a closet atheist. So he gets left behind.
He's in the clergy project, we hope.
Yeah, probably. And then, there were some funny things, like there's all this fuel flying out of the plane, and you can see it like flying out of the plane, and apparently it's just blowing fuel, and then after they look at it, for some reason, it just starts on fire. So somehow, I guess, looking at it, it must be like those experiments at the atomic level where observing it has an effect, because suddenly the fuel that's been just flying out of this plane forever, now it's just bam, it just lights up on fire. And I'm like, did someone throw a cigarette out the window? Like, what happened? How did this just catch on fire suddenly, right at the moment they check it out? And then, and the father was hitting on a hot stewardess. Nick is hitting on a hot stewardess because his wife has gone crazy world. And the upshot, I guess, is that now that his wife is gone, he can have the stewardess. So it was cool.
Yeah, that does sound. I'm not sure "cool" is the word I would use, but
no, she was a good-looking stewardess.
It's fine. I find it hard to be critical. I haven't actually seen it. I'm in agreement with you that I don't know too many Christians who would look at that version of the film, at least not the way you have described it, and say that is a particularly Christian film. But I certainly can't criticize you for watching it, as my wife, who is here, has seen God's Not Dead how many times?
Yeah.
10 times.
I have not done that one. I'm not big on going for these movies, but this one surprised me because the rapture itself and the whole Christian foundation of the film was basically just the setup for this emergency plane landing that takes place throughout the entire film. So it's just one of these sort of, like my friend said, how do we land this plane?
I'm sure that there'll be like an MST3K version of it at some point, the way there was for God's Not Dead and other stuff.
But I mean, it was a fun time. I had fun.
Well, awesome. And we're going to go ahead and start taking calls in a minute. But as a reminder, once the show's over, those of us involved get together and go to dinner at Threadgill's, which will show up here at the bottom of the screen with the address right there, 6415 North Lamar, which is just like 3 lights down there. Take a left, go up a light or so, and it's on the left. And we'll be there after we're done.
Thing?
Yes. Actually, I'd have to do it from your side.
Or is it Price is Right?
Yes.
It's a lovely dinner.
Let's go ahead and take some calls. We've got Thomas. Thanks for waiting.
Hello?
Hey,
Hello?
Thomas.
Oh, hi. Thanks for taking my call.
What's
Hello?
on your mind? Yeah, go ahead. You're on the air.
Hi. Matt, I don't know if you remember me. I called in not that long ago. I'd say maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. You and John were doing the show.
Okay.
I was a theist, and I called in, and you kind of told me about some Bible verses that I wasn't aware that were in the Bible. You told me to read Exodus 20, and I did end up reading
Exodus 21.
And Exodus 21, yeah, my bad. And I ended up reading it, and I'm sure y'all know this, but after I read it, I kind of was uncomfortable with what I found. So I looked up a little more, and I'm sure y'all know this, but that's not the only verse that made me feel uncomfortable. There was a story about this guy named Jephthah, and his daughter was like, so you know the story, I assume?
Yeah, Jephthah makes a deal with God to win a battle and says he'll sacrifice the first thing that walks out of his house. And when he gets home, what's the first thing that comes out of his house? But his daughter. Whoop! I don't know how you didn't see that one coming.
Yeah.
Hey, I can't wait to get home. I wonder what's going to be the first thing that greets me when I get there.
I want to just, I don't want to stop you from making your point, but I want to interject here that in the book of Hebrews in the New Testament, Jephthah is listed not as a buffoon who made a rash promise, but as a man of great faith.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, so, Matt, you pointed out some of those verses, and then you also, another point that you made that kind of stuck with me was you said that the creation story in Genesis had to be taken figuratively because it didn't match up with what we knew. And I didn't say anything at the time, but I kind of kept it in the back of my mind, and I did a little more research on it. And I am kind of having some doubts, I mean, because it is kind of apparent that you're right, that it does have to be taken figuratively. And I'm 18, and my parents are Baptist. They've raised me like that, and I just haven't really been exposed to anything else, I think. But I do have some doubts, and I don't know. I don't even know many atheists. Like, all my friends and family are mostly Christian. So I was just calling in to get a different view on it. I mean, I know you kind of helped me out last time and kind of told me some stuff that I wasn't aware of, kind of enlightened me a little bit.
I guess
yeah, it's kind of.
I'm curious as to what you're actually looking for.
That's exactly what I'm wondering.
Sorry?
What is it that you are asking?
Well, after I had these questions, I went to my pastor and I asked for explanations, and he said that that the stories that I was talking about were in the Old Testament, and in the New Testament, once Jesus comes and saves everyone, those Old Testament traditions and rituals are kind of eliminated.
So
let him go. So what? So what does that mean to you?
Well, he said that the Old Testament, it shouldn't be taken literally, and I was wondering, do y'all take them literally? Because he said once.
Here's a question for you. Do you think that the parts? I mean, that was the laws, I assume, that you were reading, right? Or you?
Right.
Okay, and I don't know exactly what Matt referred you to, but when you were reading what it's saying, I mean, do you understand that to be an account of your God?
Well, yeah, the Old Testament God.
Right.
And
okay.
I feel like
right.
Kinda,
but do you believe? Believe that there's one God?
Yeah, I do, but like I said, I'm kind of having some doubts. The Genesis story, having to take it figuratively, kind of it's kind of uneasy for me because I want to believe everything in the Bible.
Okay. So now that's kind of a different issue, though. Whether or not you take the creation story literally is a little different than these traditions that are bothering you. The morality of the old law and the old tradition and these old stories that are written in order to be venerating people that are doing horrendous things. Even if somebody says the tradition changed, the question is, are they saying that God had some really crappy rules and regulations and supported some really awful things, and then now it got better? I mean, what is it exactly that they're saying there? Yeah, it changed, but that doesn't mean that your God would not be accountable for whatever happened previously, correct? He would still be responsible for the things he did in the past, isn't that right?
Yeah, that's correct. That was kind of my problem, and I actually said something along those lines to my parents, and they didn't know either. So they recommended me to the pastor. I talked with him, but I still had some questions, and I kept pursuing the questions, and they were like, "Well, you're just being tempted by Satan. Like, you can't question it."
I would like to ask you something here. Let me interrupt. You said your parents referred you to the pastor?
Yeah, they referred me to a minister at our church because
why didn't they address your concerns directly?
Because I pointed out to them the Exodus 21 verse, and they were like, they didn't know that was in there either.
Right. So why didn't they address this though?
I'm not sure. They just told me, they said, well, we probably wouldn't be the best ones to explain it. Like,
Isn't this their belief?
so, yes, it is.
How can they not be the best ones to explain what they believe? Who's better to explain what you believe than you?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that makes sense. I guess they just wanted somebody who had greater knowledge of the Bible. Just like I said when I pointed it out,
They
to
want
them,
someone
they
else
didn't
to
know that
justify their beliefs to you?
yeah, I mean,
Doesn't that sound a little
yeah.
wacky to you?
Now that you put it like that, it does. Yeah,
Okay.
I didn't really think of that.
There's another
Yeah.
there's another aspect of this, Thomas, and you talked about you wanted to believe what's in the Bible. I can understand that, although I think it's a mistake to go into something wanting to believe what it says, because that way you're prone to trying to find a way to make it make sense rather than objectively assessing it. But if we look at it like this, when your preacher or whoever is telling you, oh, basically he's saying, but that's the Old Testament. So there's only a number of different ways to take this. Number one is that God used to sanction immoral things, but he got better. He got over that. Number two, the New Testament reinforces those things. And Jesus himself is credited with saying that not a jot or tittle of the law will change until all things have come to pass, that he didn't come to end the law, but to fulfill it. And yet all of this, it's clear, trust me, biblical scholars have pointed out for forever that the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New Testament from Christianity don't seem to be the same. And yet there are a number of different verses in Hebrews and Numbers and Malachi that specifically give this claim that God is unchanging, that his nature is unchanging, that he's not like man, that he's not going to change his mind, that Jesus is the same today and tomorrow and forever. And so if you have this idea that, and by the way, that is the way it should be. If in fact a God were perfect, then changing would be changing away from perfection, which would be an error, a mistake. And so if God were perfection, then he shouldn't change. But if God is perfection, then he can't sanction the evil stuff in the Old Testament. And he also can't sanction the evil stuff in the New Testament, this idea of infinite punishment for finite crimes, etc. So at the end of the day, while I'm happy that you got back to us and that you looked into this and that you're having doubts, that's great. You kind of hinted that you wanted more Bible verses to question. And I'm not going to give you any.
Oh, no, I didn't. I wasn't asking you to give me any more Bible verses. When I read Exodus 21, I looked up some myself because I know in the call you said it's not limited to this. So I actually looked up quite a number of them myself.
Yeah, and the thing is, how many? You shouldn't have to. It should only taken one. If the Bible is meant to be God's wisdom in a book, then just sanctioning slavery alone is enough to discredit the book, if the book has to be taken as one whole thing of God. So instead, I'd recommend that you do what I recommended everybody else do, which is take the good stuff wherever you find it, because there's good stuff in the Bible as well. Keep it. It's good not because it's in the Bible. It's good not because somebody attributes it to their God. It's good because it's good. That's the thing. And so that once you get to that point where it no longer matters whether it's in the Bible, but instead it matters whether or not it's good, then the Bible and Christianity and Judaism and Hinduism and Islam and all of these other religions that are pointing to ancient texts which are not particularly moral, they all fall by the wayside. There's no reason to believe them.
There's some other issues, though, Thomas. Let me bring something to your attention that might also be useful to you, especially if you're talking to your minister. What version of the Bible are you using? What translation?
NIV.
Okay, so then you have margin notes. Do you know the story of the adulterous woman?
I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Okay, do you know the saying from the Bible that he who is without sin should cast the first stone?
I've heard it.
Okay, yeah, it's a very popular phrase, and it comes out of the Bible, and it's attributed to this tale of the adulterous woman which is a very famous Christian story out of the Bible where a woman is caught in the act of adultery, and the people bring her before Jesus, and they point out that the law says that she should be put to death, and they ask Jesus what to do. And their goal is to make him either have to command that someone be put to death or to excuse her, which would be a violation of the law. And so instead of answering them, Jesus says, let him who has not sinned cast the first stone, basically saying, who among you is blameless under the law? Now, if you look in your Bible and you look up the margin notes around that story, which is a very famous story, which has spawned a very famous verse about Jesus, you'll find that that particular section of the Bible was added later. And this is actually in your Bible in the marginal notes.
Oh, okay. I didn't know what part of the Bible is that in?
If you Google the story of the adulterous woman, you'll get the verses. It's the New Testament. It involves the life of Jesus, so it's definitely one of the Gospels. I'd have to give it a look myself. It's been a while since I've read it,
and if you have an NIV, you can also read like the opening page for Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and the NIV will tell you we have no idea who wrote these. That these are just names attributed from tradition, which undermines the idea that they're actually written by eyewitnesses. And if you go to the book of Mark, chapter 16. Which is the last chapter of Mark, verses 9 through 20-ish. Those don't exist in the oldest and best manuscript. Those were clearly added at some point.
Yeah.
And those verses, what they say is really shocking, because it's about how you'll identify true Christians, that they'll be able to drink poison and handle serpents, which is where you get the serpent-handling Pentecostals. It's right there in the Bible, Mark 16 verses, 11 or 12, something like that. And also in there is a version of the Great Commission to go out and spread the word. Now, you can look at this two different ways. You can say, okay, that should have been in the Bible the whole time, which is what those Pentecostals do, in which case God has proclaimed that people will be able to handle deadly serpents and drink poison and not be fazed if, in fact, they're true Christians. But everybody on the planet knows that that's crap. Knows that everybody is almost everybody is going to die, and it's not based on whether or not they're a true Christian. So the way to get around it is to say that, well, these things are metaphorical or they're not meant to be literal. So the question to ask when people are telling you go back to the Old Testament and say, oh, well, you're looking at that as if it needs to be literal. Well, which parts of the Bible should somebody take literally? Should we take the creation story literally? How about thou shalt not suffer a witch to live? What about the Ten Commandments? What about handling serpents? If things are presented in such a way that you have no clear pathway to determine whether or not they're literal, and it seems that the justification people use for not taking something literally is that it is in conflict with what we know about reality. The creation story can't be taken literally because it contradicts what we found scientifically about the universe. This idea of being able to handle venomous snakes and drink poison and cast out demons and stuff, these things are fly in the face of what we understand about reality. And so it seems a matter of convenience that passages which have probably been considered to be face value, were viewed at their face value meaning for the bulk of Christianity, suddenly start becoming metaphor when we begin to understand more about the world. Why didn't God clear any of this up? And why, if there is a God who's only going to communicate with individuals who write down these messages, why didn't he make damn sure that everything in there was perfect and correct the first time and very clear about what was literal and what was metaphorical?
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, but one thing that I do kind of feel comfortable with the Bible. I mean, the atheists, they don't have a view of like how the universe came to be. It's like the world. I mean, something can't come from nothing, right?
How do you know that?
Well, that's like a science law. Something can't come from nothing.
Something can't come from nothing is a science law. Where?
Well, I don't know if it's a specific law or not, but I mean, it just seems kind of basic that you could have nothing and then just something could pop out. pop
Yep.
out from it.
It certainly seems to fly in the face of common sense that you could get something from nothing. But first of all, we're not necessarily saying that something did in fact come from nothing.
Let me say, when you say we're not, you don't mean atheists.
Yeah. I'm talking
Atheists-
about, so
Sorry?
your one stumbling block you mentioned was that atheists don't seem to have an explanation for the origin of the universe. Well, first of all, atheism is just a rejection of the God hypothesis. It is not a science that is out to discover an explanation for the origin of the universe. That takes place in astrophysics and in a number of other disciplines. But let's imagine for a second that nobody in the world has any idea how the universe came to be or could have come to be. Okay? Nobody knows.
Okay.
What conclusion can you reach from that about whether or not there's a God?
You probably wouldn't be able to say strongly one way or the other.
Yeah, because what
if
you're
there's
looking
a
at
God
is,
or
I
not.
don't know. I mean, what you'd be looking at would be, I don't know how it happened. And when you look at the Christian offering, right, for example, if you say, well, the Bible offers what? Like, it offers what? An explanation, right? And so you look at, what is an explanation? An explanation tells you how something was done. And if I look at the Bible, it doesn't really explain to me the process through which God created anything, right? It just says he set it to be, and then it was. And it's like, well, how is that an explanation? And then when you ask people, you know, well, what is this God that generated everything? They'll be like, well, it's incomprehensible, right? So what they're really saying is, this thing I don't understand used a process I have no awareness of to make the universe. And is that really an explanation?
Not only that, but there are many, 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 many different religions that offer different explanations for the origin of the universe.
Right.
How do you
right,
tell
yeah.
how do you tell which of them is correct? And isn't the best position to be, I don't believe any of them because they haven't met their burden of proof, and I'll wait until such time as an explanation has been offered that has met the burden of proof?
Logically, yeah, I would say what you just said. But I mean that makes a lot of sense.
So it's not just the atheists that don't have an explanation. Nobody really has an explanation. I mean, you have you have cosmology, and you can look into that if you want to see what is asserted and what is known and what is examined in order to get that information. Just a little asterisk warning: it's pretty heady stuff, and it's not something that I would ever claim to understand. But if you want an explanation for how the universe started, that's where I would start looking. Is I would want to know who the best minds were with the best evidence, who understood it the most clearly in the population, and I would want to know what they have to say about it. I mean, isn't that how you would go find out information about anything? If I wanted to know how to fix a sink, right, I would ask somebody who knows, like a certified plumber. And in the same way, if I want to know how the universe started, I would start looking with cosmology, not with religion. I would go say, well, you know, I mean, your pastor doesn't have a clue. Let me just tell you, he's probably not going to understand. If he thinks that he understands Big Bang Theory, I want to see his degree, because I doubt that he even has a grasp on what is asserted and what the evidence actually is.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's helpful. Yeah, I'll keep looking for sure. I mean, I'm kind of just getting into this. Like I said, I only called a few weeks ago. I'm just now starting to kind of question things. But yeah, that helps. So yeah, I appreciate y'all taking my call.
Well, thanks, Thomas. By the way, if you want a good book that specifically focuses on aspects of Christianity that you might not know anything about, Bart Ehrman's book, my favorite from him, is called Lost Christianities, and it talks about the battles for Scripture and faiths we never knew. All the different versions of Christianity and thoughts about Christianity that were floating around in the first couple centuries until we basically put it to a vote of the powerful people about what was going to get in the Bible and what we were going to consider doctrine.
Yeah, I have a book about it's called The Aryan Question. That's not the title of the book, but that's the question that it's examining, and it talks about how early Christian debates centered around whether or not Jesus was God, that there was argument about it, that there wasn't consensus. And then it sort of ended up where that argument won, but it wasn't, early Christianity didn't really have that view that Jesus was God.
Anyway, I appreciate the call, Thomas. By all means, keep looking into it.
One more. What was that book that you mentioned first, Matt?
Lost Christianities.
Lost Christianities.
Okay.
But
Okay. Well,
It's-
yeah, I think I'll probably look in and read that book.
yeah, it's one of many. And I'd also recommend going to infidels.org and reading everything in the library there online. It's a big help. But thanks, Thomas.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
All right, we got Edward from London. Thanks for waiting.
Oh, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, yeah. Nice to speak to you both again. Yeah, I'd like to talk about energy slowing down into physical and becoming conscious. That we all agree that that is the case.
Do we?
But that you believe.
I don't
Yeah,
even know what
sorry.
that means.
I'm
Energy
not-
slowed down and became conscious?
Yeah, your framing of this and telling me what we actually believe, when neither one of us seem to understand what you mean by that. I mean, we may believe that. I just don't recognize what you've said as what I believe. So we'll probably have to start with some definitions and explanation.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, well, physical, like Einstein says, E equals mc squared. So physical, apparently, I'm not a scientist. This is just
Clearly.
what I've been told from scientists, that physical is made up of slowed down energy.
Okay. I don't know.
Or would you?
Well, let's
I
just
don't
let you
mind
run
the
with that.
premise. Are you saying that physical has always been? Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you.
I think it gives a false impression that like energy is something that just slows down and becomes matter. The matter energy conversion is
No, I'm saying
not
the
necessarily
matter
like that
is
at all.
slowed down energy.
Ah,
Well, no, I learned this from scientists.
okay.
The physical is slowed down energy. That's what physical is. But you could, if you don't believe that, or if you don't know about that, we can use that physical has always been. But I don't think that's what scientists say. They say that energy and physical are kind of the same kind of thing. And so, if
No, I'm fine.
if
I'm
you're
fine
saying
with
that
the. I'm
physical
fine
has
with the
always
fact
been-
that I'm fine with the fact that there's a relationship between matter and energy. You know, you can talk about energy being condensed. You could possibly talk, but when you start saying, you know, energy slows down and becomes matter, I don't think you need to qualify it with "I'm not a scientist," because that's not really the way these ideas would be expressed by people who are experts in that area. And I'll point out, neither of us are experts in this area.
Right.
So I guess I'm just wondering, what's the point you're trying to get to this week?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm just repeating what I've heard scientists say, that physical is slowed down energy. That isn't my point. My point is that energy, or if you want to say physical, energy and physical can become conscious.
Well, I would
We
say
all
energy.
agree with that.
Oh.
But my point is that,
Go ahead.
yes, yeah, that I believe that there's intelligent manipulation, and you would say that there is no intelligent manipulation. But that, because you haven't got any proof, that is a belief.
Okay.
Without any
Wow.
proof.
So my position is not there's no intelligent manipulation. My position is the claim that intelligent manipulation is required or did take place has not met its burden of proof, and therefore I cannot believe it.
Yeah, okay, I don't mind discussing that, but I would go a step further, and I would say that your belief is that energy can become conscious without intelligent manipulation. I would say that
So
is your
stop.
belief.
First
that
of all,
has no
stop
proof.
telling me what my beliefs are. I don't tell you
No,
what you
I'm not
believe.
telling you. I'm asking.
You are. You are telling me.
Well, I'm presuming.
Okay, well, stop
Okay,
presuming and let's
I'm
actually
presuming.
discuss it. What good does it do?
Yeah,
Like if
okay.
I called you and just said, what you believe is that there's a magical man in the sky who turns your energy into consciousness. Does that do any good?
Well, it's not far from what I believe. I
I
believe
realize
in
that it's
intelligent
probably not far from
manipulation.
what you believe, but if I just presumed that and instead you had a different view of this, then all I would have done would have been to prop up some kind of straw man to beat on. Now, if you want to say that that is your belief, that there's a magical man in the sky, then we can discuss that. But when we talk about, basically, what I understand you to be calling in about is an explanation for how we're conscious, right?
Yeah, ultimately, I would say that is by means of intelligent manipulation of energy.
Sure. Why do
That's
you
how
believe
we
that
are
intelligent
conscious.
manipulation? Why do you believe that intelligent manipulation is either required or did in fact happen?
Well, I want to ask the same question to you. Why do you believe that energy can become conscious without intelligent manipulation? What are
That
you basing that
I
belief
just
He didn't say he
explained to you.
believed that.
I just explained to you that's not my position. I don't have an explanation for consciousness.
Okay.
I am not asserting that consciousness can or does happen absent some sort of intelligent manipulation. I am saying that if you claim that intelligent manipulation is required or did happen, you have adopted a burden of proof and you need to meet it. And until such time as you do, I have no reason to believe that intelligence is required.
Yeah, I would totally agree with you. But
'Cause I'm right.
I also say that your burden of proof. Yeah, you
Okay,
are right.
but here
totally
I
agree
think
with
there's a
you,
little
and
bit
I
of a
do
wait. There's
accept
the problem here, Edward, is that you seem to be conflating what Matt is saying he doesn't believe with what he does believe. So Matt is saying that he is not accepting the proposition you're putting forward, and you're saying that that means that he believes that this was given rise to without an intelligence, but he has not expressed what he does believe. He simply said what he doesn't believe, and you're conflating that with what he does believe.
Yeah, fair enough.
And so I asked you, why do you believe that
Yeah.
an intelligence is required or actually was involved in the rise of consciousness? And instead of answering why you believe that, you decided that you would ask me why I believe it's not required, which isn't necessarily my position at all. Can you not offer a reason why you believe this?
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's my question. I'm asking you the same question.
Wait,
What
let me try.
proof
Can
do
I use
you
a
By all
version?
means.
I'm gonna.
He's
I
all
want to.
yours.
Okay, Edward. I want to try to use
I'm going to take a nap.
a variation of a gumball analogy that Matt used to use. Let's say that we have a big jar full of just rainbow colors of gumballs, right? Just like it's full of Skittles, let's say, right? Because Skittles come in all these colors. And I'm looking at this jar of Skittles, and somebody says, I believe that there are more green Skittles in that jar than any other color. And I say, what makes you believe, like, why do you believe that? And they're telling me, well, I think that's what's true, and you should believe it too. And I'm saying, well, why should I believe it? Like, why do you think there's more green Skittles? And they say, yeah, I don't know. Intuition. And I'm like, well, yeah, but that doesn't really convince me there's more green Skittles. So if you're asking me to believe there are more green Skittles in that jar than any other color, I don't. And so they're turning around and then they say to me, so you're saying that there's more red Skittles than any other color. You understand why me saying I don't believe them doesn't say that what I do believe?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I would say that beliefs count for absolutely nothing. And that's why I'm questioning what I'm presuming is your belief.
Right, but what I'm saying is why would you presume that if I tell you that I'm not convinced there are more green Skittles in that jar than any other color, that I have said that there are not more green Skittles than any other color? I didn't say that. I said that you have not convinced me that there are. I didn't say that I'm convinced that there aren't. Did I?
Yeah, I understand you.
I don't think you do
I
understand
your point, but the default should be I don't. Beliefs count for nothing. So the default should be I don't know. I don't know whether energy can become conscious by without intelligent manipulation or with intelligent manipulation.
That's fine.
The default shouldn't be I will believe this until proof.
Correct. Now explain why you have departed from the default that I'm holding.
Well, I would say that the default should be. I would say that you. Correct me if I'm wrong.
You are.
I would say that the default is I don't know. I don't know whether it can happen if it happened with intelligent manipulation or without intelligent manipulation.
We
Correct.
agreed that that was the default. You have departed from the default.
Yeah.
And I'm asking why you have departed from the default.
How has Matt departed from the default? Can you explain what it is that, like, why you think he has held, why do you think he holds a position that this is unknown?
Rather than saying I don't know whether it was intelligent manipulation or without intelligent manipulation, I'm presuming that Matt is taking the stance of energy can become conscious.
Can we just hang up on Edward now? I mean,
I guess I don't know why you think that. Like, I don't understand.
Since I just fucking told you that's not the case.
Before you cut me off, can't you clarify that? Okay, so you're saying you don't know.
Edward. I already have clarified it. Yeah. I specifically agreed with you that the default position is I don't know whether or not an intelligence is required to intervene.
Right.
And I pointed out before then, when you said that my position was that an intelligence is not required, I said that's not my position. My position is that I am not convinced that an intelligence is required. I clarified this several times, and you are still arguing against this straw man, even after both of us have tried to explain this to you. And Tracie did it with Skittles. And we have agreed on what the default position is. Now, the default position for, let's say, how does consciousness arise? My position is, I don't know. And then the question becomes, is an intelligent mind required to manipulate in order to result in consciousness? And my position is, I don't know. But your position is that you do in fact believe that an intelligent mind is required to manipulate in order to result in consciousness, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So you're the one who has departed from the I don't know position, correct?
Yeah, correct.
Can you explain to us why you've done that without saying I've done it too when I haven't?
Okay, yeah, all right. Well, I beg your pardon. Maybe I misunderstood from my limited research on yourselves. I presumed, which I said initially, that it was a position, a premise that energy can turn into consciousness with it.
Edward, okay, I don't need another explanation. Yeah, I don't need you to explain for the 10th time that you presumed. You have presumed and we've called it out. You presumed and we called it out. I don't need you to explain why or the fact that you presumed. Please either give an account for why you believe an intelligence is required, or I'm moving on to some other caller.
Okay, so what, are you asking for proof?
Oh, for Christ's sake.
From me, yeah? So, okay, I accept it.
You know, you're in England. I realize that we're two countries separated by a common language, but I don't think that my English is so bad that it should result in this much anxiety. How many ways can I say, please give us your explanation for why you have departed from the neutral starting position to your present belief that an intelligence is required in order for consciousness to arise?
Yeah, okay, because the intelligent designer has communicated with conscious human beings in the form of text.
The Bible.
And that the proof of that text is fulfilled prophecy, and it is deliberately difficult. So,
yeah, we've gone down this prophecy road with Edward before, and he was specifically told that if he called back in with this without offering an understanding of what.
For the record, prophecy is one of the worst possible apologetics to anybody. I mean, there is so much wrong with the concept of fulfilled prophecy. Yeah. It's just not even.
I would, you know, I don't necessarily want to be entirely self-promotional on the show, but I do have another project other than the Atheist Experience. This is where I volunteer. I also have a project on Patreon called Atheist Debates, and there I cover a lot of topics. And they're on my YouTube. They're free for everybody to see. And I cover prophecy and burden of proof. And I've talked about the Gumball analogy. All of these things are explained in detail in little, maybe 30-minute-ish videos to try to be as clear as possible. And it frustrates me that we can spend years doing this show and having these conversations. Yes, we're going to get the same questions over and over. That's unavoidable. But to have the same caller
Right.
keep calling in
Yeah.
and have it to repeatedly explain, don't presume that because I don't believe you, that I then believe the opposite of you, and then try to use that while offering nothing. Oh, well, I believe that intelligence is required for consciousness. Why? What was his reason for believing intelligence requires, or consciousness requires an intelligence? Because the intelligent designer has communicated with human beings through text. Please point to any one of those that actually addresses the beginnings of consciousness, because I can communicate to you through text, but I'm not responsible for your consciousness. You couldn't even construct a simple syllogism to back this up. Instead, it was, I believe. You weren't telling me why you believe. You were telling me what you believe. This gets back to whether or not something is an explanation.
Yes, I was just thinking that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I was like, it's still not an explanation. It would be something I don't understand, did something I don't know, and then consciousness. That's not an explanation. An explanation is supposed to shed light on the process by which something came to be. And this is not saying a thing I can't understand, did something I don't know, and then this. That's like saying X plus Y equals,
Bicycle.
consciousness. And it's like, that's not an explanation. Can you tell me what X is? No, I don't understand it. Can you tell me what Y is? No, I don't know. Well, then you didn't explain consciousness.
But you didn't even get close, because when you say, I believe that consciousness requires an intelligence, and my reason is, I believe an intelligence talks to human beings. Edward, from now on, when you call in, they should just label you non sequitur man, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, because it's like even if there were completely solid prophecies with names and dates and from today, right, that were written 2,000 years ago in the Bible, and we could verify that, how would we know that these other claims were accurate?
I predict that I will hang up on Edward every time he calls. There's some prophecy for you.
It doesn't mean that everything else Matt says is correct.
But yeah, yes. Even if that turned out to be completely true, everything else I say could be wrong. Yeah. Which gets us back to the other caller about you might find something. This is why I don't want people desperately looking for something in the Bible that is good and worth hanging on to while they shrug off all the garbage.
Yeah.
Because if, in fact, you just look at it as a book where there's a bunch of things, some of them are true and some of them aren't, okay, fine. I'm good with that.
Yeah.
But if you view it as the manual for life written by the all-wise creator of the universe, the second we start pointing out problems, that book goes away. It's start dripping red paint into that bucket of white, and it's not white anymore from the get-go. And if you're looking for white, you're probably a racist. Sorry. Talk about non sequiturs. Hey, we've got Alex in Sterling, Virginia. Thanks for waiting. As he fumbles for the
Can
microphone.
you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hi. First, let me say that those last two callers were painful to listen to.
You should be sitting where we're sitting.
Okay, so I've been listening to you guys for quite some time, and I've been kind of back and forth in my faith, I would say, and I'm kind of at this point now where I'm not entirely sure how I feel. I'm at a point where I don't necessarily believe that the things in the Bible are accurate, because they have been so thoroughly debunked, and all the things in there that are horrible. Let's just say it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I still have this
Belief.
this feeling.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
like
understand.
when I like when I think about, God and Jesus, I feel like I'm talking to another person.
Hmm.
Is that just me? Am I crazy?
No, you're trained.
And
I mean, you were trained to view it that way. I mean, just think about, if you trained a child to believe that there was a monster in the closet all the time, and I could come and make all the best arguments in the world, but if you were convinced, by the time I reach you, if you're an adult and you're convinced that there really are monsters in the closet and other people around you have socially reinforced that, even if I could sit there and tell you really good reasons why this can't be true, you're probably still going to fear the monster in the closet for a while. It doesn't just, sometimes that feeling doesn't just go away. There are people that I know who are atheists who are very, very confident in their atheism, as far as they fall onto the strong atheist spectrum, where they say, I can say that I believe there is no God. And yet they have a fear of hell, right? They'll write and say, why do I still have this fear of hell? And it's like, well, because someone taught you to be afraid of hell. I mean, when you're that's what indoctrination is, right? I mean, if it didn't work, nobody would do it. Indoctrination is done to people because it works in a lot of people. And I had that same thing. That was, I think, probably the hardest thing for me to finally acknowledge, was just coming from myself. And I think that might be a good starting point, right? Is to understand that feelings, I don't know if you know the difference between interpersonal and intrapersonal communications, but interpersonal communication is the communication that takes place within your own head, okay? And in human beings, there is a constant conversation happening in their brains, right? So you have always, you're getting emotional feedback about your surroundings, and information is coming in, and your brain is constantly processing that information and giving you information about what's happening around you. You get so used to it, right? Because you grow up with it, and so you don't hardly hear what your brain is telling you, but your brain is constantly communicating with you. And one of the things it communicates are your emotions. So emotions, we know, are generated from the brain, okay? If you didn't have a brain, you wouldn't have emotions. And there are parts of your brain that can be damaged that impact your ability to feel emotion. So you can actually be emotionally impaired by damage to the brain. So we know that it's a brain that creates feelings, correct?
well, yeah,
Okay.
I'm a biology buff. I accepted evolution
Right.
going through school.
So this feeling that you have, is simply your own brain, right? It doesn't indicate something really happening. It's simply your perception of something. And so I give an example sometimes where
So you're saying I'm talking to myself, and
Yes.
I'm convincing myself it's God.
Yeah, and because that's how you've been taught to interpret those messages.
There's another kind of tweak to it. So first of all, in my path out of Christianity, the Bible went away, but I was still looking for reasons to believe, until I realized essentially that you can't really have any reason. If you chuck the whole Bible out, Christianity goes away, as does Judaism and other Abrahamic religions that have that foundation. If you're not convinced of, for example, the creation story and the fall from grace and all these other things. But there was a period of time where it didn't quite click that you could not continue to have these beliefs. Honestly, you could still say, okay, these people tried to explain reality and they got it wrong in the book, but they're still pointing to something true, and I'm going to keep believing that true thing or keep trying to find that true thing. But when you say that when you talk to Jesus, it feels like you're talking to another person, and I don't mean this to be rude at all, I'm going to question whether or not that's actually true, because I've talked to other people, and it's nothing at all like talking to God. Do you hear back
No.
Okay, so
no.
I mean, there are people who might say, well, I prayed and I talked to God and I heard an audible voice. There are other people who got like a fuzzy impression. And I think as soon as you depart from audible voice, you're already leaps and bounds beyond what it's like to talk to another person. Because even talking to another person, there's more than just an audible voice involved. But if you just,
Yeah.
if you feel like you're
Like
talking to a person, that's different from talking with a person. And this idea of a
Right.
personal relationship with a God, it's, I think, one of several strong death knells for Christianity. Because I could be wrong about ultimate morality and ultimate truth. But there's one thing that I can't be wrong about, and that is knowing what it's like for me to be in a relationship with someone. I know what that feels like. And it would be dishonest for me to say that I was in a relationship with some supernatural being, because now I'm using the word relationship in an entirely different manner.
Yeah, but what I
Right.
think Alex is describing, though, is you are in communication with yourself. And I think what the church does in many cases is train people to view that conversation as with something else instead of recognizing it as your own head. And so you actually are looking at the subconscious communication that's coming up into the conscious level, and you're saying those impressions are coming to me from somewhere.
Yeah.
And since I don't recognize them as thoughts that I generated because I became consciously aware of it, so it had to come from somewhere else, right? But there's a non-conscious level to your brain, and it never stops working. And sometimes it makes you consciously aware of what's going on back there. So it creates these ideas, and it creates these impulses, and it creates these feelings, and then it bubbles them up to where you are consciously aware of them. And it very much can feel like, where did this come from, right? It's like I've had dreams before that something will happen in the dream and it surprises me. And you kind of think to yourself, how can it surprise me if I'm the one making up the story? Right? I'm writing the story of the dream, and yet something happened that I didn't expect. How is that even possible? Well, it's possible because you're not aware of everything your brain is doing all the time, but you can treat it like somebody else. Does that make sense, Alex?
So what you're saying is if you disregard the Bible, you ultimately have no basis for belief.
No.
There's no.
It's entirely, I'm not saying it's impossible that you could, so chuck the Bible out, and even with the Bible gone, maybe I've had a proper personal revelation, or I have some other source that serves as a foundation for my belief. What I'm saying is that when I got rid of the Bible, it became clear to me that I had no other justification. Not that no other justification was possible.
And I had a different experience, right? So I got rid of my Christianity, and then I continued to believe a God existed for like 10 years afterwards because I had the same feeling you did. And so I kept searching for this God and searching for these answers because I couldn't shake the feeling that God was there. I just felt it, right? But now I know that feelings don't actually represent what happens in the observable world, right? You can sometimes have a feeling about a situation, and then you find out that the situation is different than what you thought it was, and the feelings were incorrect, right? I use an example sometimes when I talk to people about going down an alleyway and you see a shadow and you get afraid thinking that there might be someone lurking in the shadows, and then you find out it's just a garbage bag blowing in the wind or a cat or something doing something, and it's not like a person there waiting to mug you. So you can have fear, which is indicative of recognizing that there's a threat to you, even in a situation where there's no real threat, because you just misinterpret the situation, and therefore you get wrong emotional feedback that doesn't really accurately represent what's happening. And so feelings can be wrong, right? They can misalign with what's actually going on in the world around you. And I'm saying that what's happening here, when you're saying that you've got all these doubts and you're not sure you believe the Bible anymore, but you still have this feeling that there's a God, what I'm saying is try to learn about feelings and where they come from and how they arise and how they can sometimes be inaccurate as far as aligning with what's actually happening around you. And you'll start to understand that a strong feeling doesn't really mean much. Does that help?
Well, I'm aware of that. I'm aware of like emotions come from the brain, that if you alter the brain, you can alter the person.
Right. But if you're working at this point on a feeling, right, that there's a God, that there's somebody or something there, then what you're really saying is that I just keep telling myself there's something in someone there. That's kind of what's keeping you believing, is your own mind just simply repeating this pattern.
You're right.
It took me 10 years to figure that out. I hope it sinks in with you sooner than that, because that was a lot of time wasted for me in looking for answers to things that were useless. Only useful in the sense that they ultimately led to me understanding what I just explained to you. But if you can really internalize that quicker rather than later, you'll save yourself a lot of energy in researching things that may ultimately, I can't say that you will have the same conclusion I did, but if you come to the same conclusion I did, the less time spent getting there, the better.
Right. Okay.
Great. Thanks for the call, Ox.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. We've got, I'm told I should take Reg's call. So are you there, Reg?
Hello.
Hey.
Hi.
Hi.
Who are the heavyweights? I love watching y'all show.
I don't know. Tracie's really thin.
Lightweight.
Oh.
Anyway, I've watched all your debates, Matt, just about, and I've watched Tracie as much as I can. And I want to clarify something. I've studied cosmology since I was a kid. Since I was like the age of reason, quote unquote, however you want to define that. E equals MC squared. What is a squared?
Something by it times itself, right? I mean.
That's right.
Yeah.
186,000 miles per second times itself.
Okay.
That's when matter becomes energy. Not when you reach the speed of light, but when you reach the speed of light squared. That's what a lot of these Christians who are calling in to say, oh, well, it's slowed down and it's speeded up and it's all this other, don't understand. That's like 3 trillion miles per hour.
Okay, I don't know how this is relevant to the other call because we didn't get into specifics of numbers. It's not like he said how much it slows down.
I gotta say, I'm like,
well,
yeah. So
math defines the universe, right?
No, I would say that it describes the universe.
Well, true. But it's the best tool we have to describe the universe.
Yes.
Okay, so if matter doesn't become energy until 3 trillion miles per hour, then how can they say it slows down and it becomes consciousness and it does
because
this
if you look at the first of all, what you're arguing, okay, you just said if matter doesn't become energy until it gets to 3 trillion miles an hour, then the converse of that would be that matter or energy becomes matter once it gets slower than that 3 trillion miles an hour. So it's still the slowing down thing. I don't think we're getting anywhere that's productive with the first caller at all here.
yeah, I'm so confused. I just keep thinking, like, isn't heat energy?
Yeah.
And it's moving that fast?
Well, no.
I'm not getting this.
It depends on wavelength.
So
Yeah.
Really.
We'll
I'm so not the person to have this
We'll
conversation.
take the science
with.
discussion
Like,
offline and do it another time, Reg. Thanks for calling.
Yeah.
Okay.
All righty.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's one of those conversations when I'll just keep opening my mouth and sounding more and more stupid.
Yeah.
So I can't even.
Well, we've got Jeremy in Pittsburgh. Hey, I was just in Pittsburgh a week or two ago.
Yeah. Hi.
Hey.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, I actually heard you speak. It was a lot of fun. I really liked what you said, but what was I going to discuss? Oh, right. The whole question of like, who do I talk to? Oh, okay. What did I?
We can read your description if it would help.
That might help.
Okay, go
I'm
for
nervous,
it.
Sorry.
Read his description.
It just says you're an Orthodox Jew and you want to know where to look for information about why we're wrong.
Yes, exactly, right. Because like I've had people approach me, like people like approaching Jews and trying to change their minds.
So the thing is, I think, and I don't mean to just like be dismissive, but I think you've got it exactly backward. Your thing is, hey, I'm an Orthodox Jew. Please point me to information that shows that I'm wrong. And my response to you is, please point to the information that shows that you are right.
Well, I mean, I've found the things that I've learned from studying Orthodox Judaism useful. So in this case, I mean, I'm not trying to convince you. I'm trying
Sure, but useful doesn't.
Understood.
The fact that something provides usefulness or that you feel that you benefit from it tells you nothing at all about whether or not the ultimate foundation that you're accepting is true. I mean, that's how we get to lucky socks. People show up at the bowling alley and they do have a particularly good run with a pair of socks or a lucky shirt or a rabbit's foot. And it doesn't matter at all whether it's ultimately providing them with anything truth or useful, but they can be very convinced that it is actually helping them. And it can actually be taken to the extent that if they don't wear those, it psychologically affects them and builds up anxiety such that their performance declines. So those lucky socks are actually helping them, even though there's nothing about those socks or anything about the superstition that they apply to it that is in fact true.
So should that person at that point then take off the socks?
I would say that they should take off the socks or at least realize that there's nothing about the socks that are helping them. That if they truly thought these were in fact lucky socks, they should find a way to test that isn't subject to confirmation bias. And I've personally bowled some really good games in these socks, so I'm just going to keep going.
I mean, isn't it sad that somebody would have that kind of bowling skill and instead of saying, wow, I'm a really good bowler, they say, wow, I have really lucky socks? Like, shouldn't they give themselves credit for the things in their life that they're actually capable of doing?
I mean, suppose I do have that standard, though, like to a certain extreme where, like, I can get to, I mean, I'm not saying I can, but where I can get to something that is applicable from whatever garbage I started out with. At that point, does it really matter that I was wearing socks in the first place? I might realize, oh, the socks are leading me to use such and such technique, which is leading me to perform well in bowling.
Yeah.
Should I really throw away the socks?
Well, I guess what I'm saying is that at the point that you realize that you have that capacity and that it really isn't the socks, why not own it and say, I can bowl? And then go to the bowling alley and kick butt and say, I'm doing this, not the socks. Isn't that a better way to live your life?
Yeah, I guess.
Well, I mean, don't you think it would be sad that somebody has this ability and yet, just like, I guess with a child, if a child has like a teddy bear that they're afraid to sleep without because they think monsters will get them without the teddy bear, don't you think that it would be worth trying to find a way to convince the child that monsters aren't going to get them and the teddy bear's nice? And if they would like the teddy bear, they can have the teddy bear, but they shouldn't be afraid of monsters and think that the teddy bear is what's keeping them safe. They need to understand there's not monsters. Wouldn't that be a better way for that child to go to bed feeling safe, knowing that there aren't monsters?
Yeah, how traumatized is that kid when they lose their only protection from monsters?
Yeah,
which
the teddy bear
wasn't
gets
actually protection
lost
from
one day
monsters.
at daycare, and then the kid is, horrified. I mean, it's better to understand what's really going on. I think 9 times out of 10, the knowledge, I've been talking to some friends of mine about some different things and explaining to them how knowing things can help you exert control over aspects of your life. When you understand things about yourself and things about other people, you actually have more information that helps you choose ways to negotiate those relationships and those situations better because you have more information about them. Isn't that true about anything? Like when you're going to buy a house, you want to have good, accurate information about that house before you purchase it. You wouldn't, you know what I mean? Like the more you know about it, the better your decision will be. And so when we have information that we're using that's inaccurate, it tends to be a general principle that I would want to avoid. The idea that incorrect information that I'm integrating is harmless or helpful. It's like usually what I want is good information and the best information and the most accurate information possible if I'm going to be making decisions that are especially affecting my life in some way.
I'm curious though, so you talked about how you get things that you find beneficial. I mean, that I fully get. I would hear that from people of all different religions, by the way, that there's something good in any number of religions that benefit people and perhaps in their daily life or teaching them about humanity or whatever else. But what is it that you, I guess I'm asking, what is it that you believe is true? Is there actually a God, or are you looking at this as kind of the best of man's wisdom type thing? Hello?
Jeremy?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Hi. Yeah.
Hi.
Wait. Oh, hi. Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, like, I don't know what YouTube comments you've read and which you haven't, but like, uh, I mean, like, when I talk about God as truth, obviously that's not necessarily something that has practical meaning for most people. Like, once you get to the point where you're defining God in a way where you've defined him into existence, usually that's okay. Now what do I get from it? But like, what I've seen in these texts is like basically a way of using that and talking with God, like talking with a standard of truth, and in that way gathering truthful information. It's sort of like bringing emotion into skepticism, if that makes sense. That's what I've seen in it. The thing is that we start from weird assumptions, right?
I guess my question would be, why not just say truth is truth and I value truth?
Because when you say
I did say that.
Well,
no, you said God is
to God to
truth.
get truth.
Well, you were saying that you when you represent God as truth, I thought what you were saying was that representing God as
either way, whatever.
Yeah, representing the two are somehow synonymous, even if it's in a metaphorical way. And then saying that I then go on to utilize that metaphor in a way that helps me look for truthful things. But I'm kind of wondering, if I say truth is truth and I value truth, won't that lead me, isn't value of truth something that would lead you to then look for truth as well?
Yes.
So what does God add to that for you?
Yeah, I mean, because if you say that truth and God are synonymous,
then it's just like saying truth is truth. I mean, it's like you're saying X equals Y, and I'm saying, then why not just say Y is Y?
There's no reason to think that truth is a person or an agent or any sort of acting, or that there's no reason to think that truth is supernatural. So, I mean, whenever we take these attempts...
I mean, truth will relate to whatever truth is relating to in the way that it...
Okay.
Anthropic principle.
I'm fine with tautologies. I'm just wondering, what is the justification for adding the God baggage to something like truth?
Honestly, I'd prefer not to. I'd prefer to use the names that just convey the meanings that are applicable to whatever action.
Sure.
And
how is that
in English, unfortunately?
How is that consistent with Orthodox Judaism?
How is what? Wait, what's that? Sorry, I'm trying to.
Well, I'm wondering how.
Frustrated me.
So you're okay with just using the words that are typically used for this without adding anything extra to it. And it seems to me like you're just a person who tends to care about truth and you're finding meaning in whatever writings, but I don't know how that maps to being an Orthodox Jew. Because granted, Reform Jews may or may not believe that a God exists, but to my understanding, if you're an Orthodox Jew, you believe that there's an actual God, a thinking agent who created all of this, who chose the ancient Israelites as his preferred people, and rescued them from their enslavement and created covenants with them. I mean, am I wrong? I thought that was all part and parcel of Orthodox Judaism.
I mean, each of those things takes on a pretty different meaning when you look at texts from like the last 200 years or so. But
okay,
yeah,
so that doesn't sound so much like Orthodox Judaism as let me look at modern takes on what's Orthodox.
Well, I guess let me just ask.
Maybe I should say
this might help, Jeremy. I mean, when you're identifying as an Orthodox Jew, do you think that what you believe is aligned with, like, for example, the rest of your Orthodox community?
I mean, no, I don't really get to discuss it with them much, but I mean, like,
Yeah,
I've
I'm
been
getting the
reading that
feeling that
document.
when you identify as an Orthodox Jew, what you're actually conveying to us is that this is the community you were raised in. I'm not so
No.
sure that you're saying.
That's false.
Oh, you weren't raised as an
Um,
Orthodox Jew. You converted?
Well, I mean, I was raised as a Reformed Jew and I got into the.
Okay, and then you became Orthodox. So
Sure.
you chose now. You chose to then move into a framework, and can I ask? I'm not telling you. I'm asking you. That was like what Matt described. Is that correct?
Remind me what Matt described in a few words. Sorry.
Oh, just about like is the
I'm
community
tired.
that you moved to, that you chose, right? That you converted to. Do they have a literal understanding of God as far as you understand it? As far as what they would tell me if I wanted to join, would they say that, God is real?
I mean, they would. I mean, we talk about God as like.
Do they believe God is an agent?
What do you mean by agent?
That he has
Sorry.
agency, that he has a will and a mind, and that he thinks, and that that God is a person in some way, that he has
No,
agency.
those come after God. No, the God himself doesn't. I mean, he might have those things, but those aren't descriptive of him. It's like, but God is just like truth, except truth is a little too specific for what God is. But,
So it sounds like we're
and
talking
then
more about
as he relates to
orthopraxy
it,
than
he can have a
orthodoxy.
will, but I mean, and as he relates to something with a will, he'll have a will. But what were you saying? Sorry, what's orthopraxy? I've never heard that word.
So I found it a little ironic because what you're describing as Orthodox Judaism sounds a lot more like Orthoprax Judaism. Orthodoxy
I don't know what it is.
orthodoxy means correct doctrine, and orthopraxy is correct practices. And it sounds a little bit like Orthodox Judaism under your description is more about the practices than it is about specific doctrines. And that's why I'm confused as to how this fits in, because your description of it.
That's what I've always. I mean, you come to the same action through different doctrines. That's always been what we've done. That's not even new. What are you saying? Sorry.
I'm saying it's got the incorrect name.
Okay, it's fine. So let's call it.
But I'm not that worried about the name.
No.
Okay. Okay. So
that's fine.
I think what we're trying to figure out is exactly what is being expressed. Like, do you believe that the beliefs that you hold or the beliefs of your community convey anything supernatural about the universe?
Well, I mean, we're relating to the universe in a way that includes, I mean, like even nature includes like supernatural pieces, and we include those, but
by
we're still
definition
relating
it
to
can't.
the natural world as a natural world. But
well, no, I mean,
what do you
if
think?
something is supernatural, it's by definition beyond the natural world. That would be what the super prefix would convey.
I mean, yeah, without the natural world, some of this stuff would still be true, but we still relate to and learn from the natural world. That's what it's there for. But what are you saying?
I guess what I'm trying to say is, okay, for example, there's a group of people called, God, I can't even remember, that the universe is God, right? I mean, that say the universe is God, that all that exists is God.
All that exists is not the universe. Oh, sorry, wait, maybe it depends how you use.
They're saying that everything that exists is God. That's kind of there's a group of people that believe that, and their name is escaping me at this moment. But what I'm trying to get at is, would you agree with that? Would that statement resonate with you, or would you say, no, that's incorrect? And if you would say it's incorrect, please explain the extra steps that you would be taking.
I mean, so starting with God as truth again, because that's how I relate to him most easily this
Does
past week.
Does God want anything?
No, God.
He doesn't
can't have
want
any
anything of you?
information attached to him, including a will, because that would already be a restriction, which would make it less than true.
So
because
God
you could have
doesn't
a different will, for instance.
God doesn't have a
or
will.
have a non-will.
God doesn't have a will, is what you're saying.
Well, I mean, I'm.
Because I asked because I'm so confused by this conversation that I've popped over to jewishvirtuallibrary.org to look up their explanation of Orthodox Jewish doctrine, which is that the written and oral Torah are divine in origin, and that both writings are to determine how best to live in accordance with God's will. And they put the little dash in there instead of the O, which I can't understand why you would do that if God wasn't some agent you could piss off by actually writing his name instead of just...
Because we consider the respect for what that name represents to be a good.
Why is it disrespectful? Why is it disrespectful to actually? If you mean the same thing, isn't this really about like the same thing as saying whether I should say darn or damn, whether I should say frick or fuck?
I still am just trying to figure out what he believes.
Yeah, me too. But well, no, actually, no. I have a pretty good idea, but I'm trying to figure out how to share it.
Well, I apologize, but we have completely run out of time for the show today, and I don't think we're going to make any headway.
Thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate it, and by all means, maybe call back. We can have another discussion and clarify things a little bit. My apologies to the other people who are waiting in line. I think after we close out, I might try and answer a couple quick questions.
Yeah, I can do after show too.
Before we head to dinner. Thanks to everybody in the crew for making the show happen, all the people out in the audience out there. And let's all go maybe talk to more Orthodox Jews and see if we can get some consensus on what it actually means. But we'll be at dinner at Threadgill's. There's the address. Down there, 3 lights. Take a left. It's over. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Hi, this is Russell Glasser, host of The Atheist Experience. You know, The Atheist Experience is made possible by volunteers and the generous support of viewers like you. If the promotion of positive atheist culture and separation of church and state are values that you hold, please consider contributing by becoming an ACA member or visiting our product page at evolvefish.com under the Partner tab. Thank you.